going to be able to speak on the platform today, but I guess that we think they've made the right decision and that it's very good that they're there doing their best to bring justice for Barbara. We are very honoured and pleased, nevertheless, to be able to welcome Darren Johnson, who's just arrived. Darren Johnson is a Green Party member of the London Assembly, and he's going to bring greetings and support from the Green Party and speak about, once again, speak about why an attack on Iran would be a catastrophe. So, big hand for Darren, please.
Thank you. As you've heard, unfortunately, Caroline Lucas can't make it this evening, but she did ask me to come along on behalf of the Green Party, and certainly you have our full and continued support in this campaign. We were very, very clear in our election manifesto that we were completely opposed to military action against Iran. It's simply not the way forward. As Caroline Lucas has said time and time again, not only is it immoral in terms of the impact on the Iranian people, the impact in terms of world peace and so on, it's also going to be completely counterproductive. At the moment, there are a range of different voices, a range of different views in Iran. If you start trying to bomb people into submission, then people tend to unite behind a single message and a single way forward. You look at what happened in Britain when the Nazis were bombing us. That united the Conservative Party right through to the Communist Party and others. Is something different going to happen in Iran if there was a bombing campaign launched against Iran? No, it's absolutely not the way forward. I think if we look back to the Iraq War, and I know that many people in the room now, as many faces that I recognise, and on the panel as well, who campaigned tirelessly against the war in Iraq, and there was frustration felt by millions and millions of people who said they went on the marches, they campaigned, they protested to their MP, they made their voice heard time and time again. Yet at the end of the day, they were ignored. It's true, they were ignored. Public opinion was ignored in that respect. But what can't be taken away from everyone who took part in the protests against the war in Iraq is that we were right, and history has proved us that we were right to oppose that illegal and immoral war, in the same way that history would prove us right if there were to be attacks on Iran. That is why we've got to remember those appalling lessons from the war in Iraq. We've got to hold firm in campaigning for peace and justice, and as we've heard, diplomacy as the way forward. If we want a better world where democracy flourishes, where human rights flourishes, where peace flourishes, where we have a sustainable future, you can't bomb people into submission, into accepting that. We've got to work through it through peace and diplomacy and solidarity. Greetings from the Green Party. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Darren. We're now going to take just a couple of minutes out for a collection which people are going to do around the room. They're going to pass buckets round. It's an obvious point, but it's one that constantly needs to be repeated, that organising meetings like this, organising campaigns costs a huge amount of money. Just the room booking is hundreds of pounds, and producing the leaflets is hundreds more pounds. But also, if we're serious, which I believe we all are, about launching a national campaign in the new year against the possibility of an attack on Iran, then we are going to have to seriously up the amount of funds, the amount of resources, the amount of practical support that we have. So I would ask you all to please dig deeply, and if possible to put notes in the buckets as they go round, so that we can refund our coffers and hopefully actually put a little bit of money aside from tonight's meeting to support that campaign in the new year. While the buckets are going round, I'd also say this, that if there's anyone in the room who feels as if they can actively participate in the Don't Attack Iran campaign, who maybe can help to organise in their area, or come and volunteer in the office, or help us out with the website and the online communications, then we'd very much like you, at the end of the meeting, to go over to the Stop the Wall stall at the back, give your name in, tell us what your expertise is, perhaps have a quick chat to some of the people behind the stall to tell them what you might be able to do, because we're going to have meetings like this in every area, right around the country, but also in every area in London. So start thinking now about what you may be able to contribute towards this campaign, if you would. And as I say, at the end of the meeting, please go to the Stop the War stall and volunteer your services. Oh, I've been asked if the buckets can come up to the top table. That's unusual. That's a first, but hopefully a precedent. So I'm now, if the buckets have done the rounds, can we have a bucket up here? If the buckets have done their rounds, I'm now going to
up here.
Sorry? Oh, and sorry, yes, there's a number of people in the balcony, which is a good sign as well. It's a very well-attended meeting. So if a couple of stewards could go up to the balcony and take the buckets around there, we'll get a few more pounds in, which would be good. I'd also say one other thing, which is that as well as getting one-off donations and collections, we actually need to increase our regular income as Stop the War Coalition. We're actually moving offices this year, so that's going to be another increase in costs. We ask at these meetings all our supporters to actually join Stop the War Coalition, and if possible to take out a monthly standing order or a direct debit, which means that we can increase our predictable income, which is very, very helpful in terms of employing more people and generally kind of strengthening the resources in the office. So again, there's membership forms at the back on the Stop the War stall, so please do take a membership form, if possible, fill it in today and fully join up to the coalition and to the campaign. I'd now like to introduce our final speaker, who is someone that many of you, if not all of you, will know. He's someone who features heavily in the graphic history of the Stop the War Coalition. There's one particularly moody photograph of him that you should have a look at, and that's no accident. It's because George Galloway was one of the people who spearheaded the fantastically inspirational and powerful campaign against the Iraq War back in 2002-2003. So it's with great pleasure that I introduce George Galloway, and very much hope that he'll be part of spearheading the campaign that now faces us against an attack on Iran. George.
Thank you very much. Chris, Lindsay, the Stop the War Coalition, for the organising of this important rally, the beginning of our mobilisation against what clearly is a present danger of an attack, military attack, on the Islamic Republic of Iran. As I was leafing through the book, which is, by the way, absolutely outstanding, and if you are giving Christmas presents, you couldn't give a better Christmas present to anyone who is interested in these subjects than that book. I've only just seen it for the first time this evening, but I'm certainly going to be buying several copies, and if you can buy any at all, I think that will be a very important thing for you and for the campaign. And I want to echo, if I may, before beginning what I have to say properly, the point that Chris has just made. You see, I'm in a position to know that a very large number of you are not actually members, of the Stop the War Coalition. I could go around because I have an elephant memory and a good memory for names and faces. Really, it's vital, if you possibly can, that you join the Stop the War Coalition so that this question of predictable income can be addressed. Even if it's only £2 a month, Chris, please, knowing that your £24 or more, if you can, was definitely coming in, would allow the coalition's work to be even more effective. But as a record of work of 10 years, the book is a fantastic testament to that. And this meeting has been really one of the most impressive that I have sat through, and I've sat through many. I have seldom heard more powerful and more somber speeches. Abbas Idlat's in particular, speaking for, I think, the vast majority of Iranians in Britain, around the world, and inside the country. He did not say, but I will say, Abbas has politics that are really different from the government of Iran. And for all I know, the young sister who addressed the rally does too. I don't know. But this is not a question of left or right or center or Islamist or not Islamist. This is not a question of where you stand on this or that aspect of the Islamic Republic of Iran. And I had this, well, sinking feeling to some extent as I heard Chris actually announce, as was his duty to do, marching orders for the 5 o'clock on the evening of an attack on Syria. This is what we've come to. This is how close we are to yet another cataclysm involving centrally our own country, our own government, our own armed forces, at a time, as Lindsay said in her wonderful speech, when we're having to borrow hundreds of billions of pounds in order to pay the debts on the hundreds of billions of pounds that we owe, at a time when it's announced, in a week when it's announced, that 25% of all households in the United Kingdom are officially in fuel poverty. At a time, in the week when it was announced by the Institute for Fiscal Studies, in the wake of the Chancellor of the Exchequer's autumn statement, that another 100,000 children in Britain had officially joined the register of those in child poverty. At a time when our country, we're told, is virtually bankrupt, is laying off hundreds of thousands of workers, at a time when our country is officially saying that we cannot afford the very basic aspects of civilization that have been built up in our country in terms of welfare and so on. These lunatics really are planning yet more war. The sense of deja vu I had as Abbas laid out all the fakes and fabrications and forgeries and laptops. Didn't you just think back, those of you old enough to remember, to the dossiers, to the presentations at the United Nations, the mobile laboratories that never were, the palaces that were supposedly built on top of nuclear, chemical and biological arsenals in Iraq. As you heard Abbas talk about these fabrications and those behind them, Didn't you just see the same parade of ghouls? Many of them, their faces waxed with fake grief, wearing their ever larger poppies ever earlier, standing at a cenotaph just a few weeks ago, grieving for the victims of past wars, all the while preparing for new wars, leaving more dead, more destruction in still more parts of the world. Didn't you just think that all we've replaced in replacing Tony Blair with David Cameron is to move from one cheek of the same arse onto the other cheek? Didn't you just think that this parade has all the familiar faces? Abbas talked about them. The Christian fundamentalists in the United States who support Israel only until they can bring about Armageddon. The faster to get to the rapture, the faster to bring about the return of the Messiah, at which point the Jews will have to convert to Christianity or all be killed. Didn't you just see the neocon servants of the military-industrial complex counting their money in the rearmament that's required? Didn't you just see the depth of the venality of the process through which we have been passing? Sleepwalking, as David Miliband put it in the Financial Times belatedly on Saturday. Sleepwalking through a deliberate polarization between different kinds of Muslims. I say this to the Muslims who will see this, at least on YouTube. Please don't fall for this gigantic fraud in which the imperialist countries who were bombing and murdering one kind of Muslim in Iraq now want to mobilize that kind of Muslim against another kind of Muslim on a sectarian basis, dividing the Muslim world so that the imperialists who hate all the Muslims, who hate all Islam, who have never done rubbishing the religion, but now want Muslims in the Gulf and far beyond to believe that this new war will be a war against Johnny Shiite and that they jolly well ought to join Uncle Sam and John Bull in killing the Shiites. Don't be fooled again. Once they've dealt with the Shiites, they'll deal with you. Excuse me, I have a chest infection. But there's a much worse infection here in our own country, isn't there? The Guardian front page revealed just a couple of weeks ago, I happen to know, directly briefed by the British Ministry of Defence to the effect that if the shooting starts, that British assets in the Gulf will be used. We're already signed up to this war, as the Stop the War Coalition correctly predicted. For years before it started, we were secretly signed up to the war on Iraq. And what a success that has been. 1 million Iraqi dead, 3 million Iraqis driven into exile Iraq broken into pieces, perhaps never to be put together again. Broken into sectarian statelets, each with their own private army. 1 million dead Iraqis, on top of the 1 million dead Iraqis, killed by the sanctions that, as Lindsay said, weren't an alternative to war, but were a prelude to war, just like the sanctions on Iran are a prelude to war. The fake outrage at 30 students getting over a wall in Tehran, my God, during the student demonstrations here in London. The treasury was entered and set on fire, as if the British state was able to control the actions of every student. I bet they wish they could. Thank you, Lindsay. This YouTube's going to be interesting. Dying man addresses rally in central London. The fake outrage at 30 students holding the Queen's portrait upside down. Talk about lèse-majesté. That justifies breaking diplomatic relations, kicking out diplomats at 48 hours notice. It's another step towards the war. Right now, this evening, Western officials are sitting with those friends of liberty in the Gulf Cooperation Council, those friends of liberty, the rulers of Saudi Arabia, the rulers of the United Arab Emirates, of Qatar and Kuwait, where there's no democracy or freedom or human rights of any kind, planning another war. But there's a difference, and this is something that we must take widely into the population. You see, Iraq was a broken country when we launched the war against it. The Iraqi regime was absolutely friendless in the region. The internal political divisions inside Iraq, as it's turned out, were terminal. Iraq had been bled white by years, a decade of sanctions that were so severe they were killing an Iraqi child every 6 minutes of every day. Iran is not broken. As a matter of fact, Iran is absolutely intact. And the best way to make sure that all Iranians come together in defense of their country and their civilization, yes, their great ancient civilization, is for Western countries and Israel to start bombing them. Then you'll see a unity in Iran that you can't even begin to dream of now. Iran is a powerful country with many weapons. Iran is a country whose culture and, yes, their religion, as Edilat explained, nowhere more apparent than here during the period of Ashura. They are ready to sacrifice, you know. They are ready to fight to the last drop of blood, and they have the means to do so. If Iran is attacked by Israel, which seems the most likely, this will be regarded by Iran as an attack by the United States of America, because no such attack could possibly happen without the permission of the United States of America. If it's treated as an attack by the United States of America, then the satrapies of the Gulf, the potentates, the kings and the sheikhs on whose soil the American army sits in such profusion, whose airspace will be used for such an attack, whose waters will be used for the naval assets for such an attack, will immediately themselves become subject to Iranian retaliation. The Persian Gulf will be on fire, never mind blocked Abbas. The Straits of Hormuz will be on fire. The allies of America in the Gulf will be on fire. Iran will answer, directly and indirectly, in the Gulf and nowhere more than inside Iraq. You see, some schoolboy theoreticians and strategists appeared not to know that when they broke Iraq, they made Iran fantastically more powerful in Iraq. And that's where Iran will answer first and foremost. So if you want to know what it will be like for the thousands of American soldiers still inside Iraq, imagine the film Zulu, but without a happy ending. Because the answer will come in Iraq, in the Gulf, in Lebanon, in Palestine. Iran will use all of its assets and mobilize all of its friends. And if you think we've got an economic disaster on our hands in Britain now, just you wait to see what happens when the oil stops flowing and the Gulf starts burning. We have to press the emergency button now. And that's what the Stop the War Coalition is doing. Spread the word. These maniacs have taken over the asylum and they're trying to destroy the world if we don't stop them. Thank you very much.
Please make sure this meeting is not just over, not the end of anything. Make sure it's the start of a massive campaign to stop this madness. Sign up at the back, go and talk to people on the Stop the War Coalition and join up. Thanks very much for coming. See you soon.